Welcome to the Connect with TrueSight webinar series. During today's event, you'll be able to ask questions of our panelists. The questions and answers, along with today's broadcast, will be published to the YouTube channel a week from today's date. Our topic today is TSCO, Data Marts, and Roles-Based Access Best Practices. Adrian, Cermeno, and Bao Phac will take us through this content. Over to you, Adrian.
Thank you, Greg. First, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Adrian Cermeno. I have been working with BMC since 2016, providing support to TrueSight capacity optimization, that is also known as TSCO. I'm accredited and certified on capacity optimization, and today we are going to talk about TSCO best practices for data marts and capacity views. And Bao Phac will present the best practices for role-based access. Before we start, for simplicity, I'm going to refer to TrueSight capacity optimization as TSCO. So let's take a look to today's agenda. On today's webinar, Connect with TrueSight, on the overview, I will make an introduction to what is TSCO and the audience target of this webinar. On Data Mart, we will see the different options that we have on TSCO to create data marts, and I will run a demo of each one of these options. We will also talk about the different capacity views that integrate with data marts, and I will demo the creation of these views. On troubleshooting, we will talk about the most common issues we have seen reported from our customers and how to solve them. On the role-based access, we will introduce the concept and demo how it applies into TSCO. And finally, on the reference section, you will find links to knowledge articles and documentation that will provide high value on the creation and configuration of data marts and roles. TSCO helps you to analyze, forecast, and optimize IT capacity and performance across all IT resource and environment by understanding the usage of resource, showing the current utilization level of a server, avoid risk identifying upcoming saturation, improve efficiency by identifying underutilized or overallocated resource, and manage demand to satisfy new workload requirements. This webinar will help our customers to successfully create data marts that can be used to present data to specific teams or prepare data for custom views, as well how roles provide access to different TSCO features. We have three types of data marts on TSCO. The analysis model data mart, as the name says, is the data mart that contains data generated by an analysis or model. This type of data mart can be used to prepare data for the capacity views or other external tools. You can use them to rename columns using more appropriate labels. You can display the statistic of interest. You can define table indexes to speed up the data access. And also during the creation, you can grant access to the selected database user or roles. The second type of data mart is the SQL-based data mart that uses standard SQL statements to manipulate data and create more complex views or reports. Using an SQL-based data mart, you can also rename columns to more appropriate labels. You can select a specific data series, metrics, and a statistic of interest. You can group the results, and you can build an advanced report template and an advanced capacity views. A SQL-based data mart can be populated on the fly when the query is performed, which is the standard behavior. But the best practice is to configure the data mart with a materializer task that will create a table and populate it with the content of the SQL defined. Why is the best practice to use a materializer task? When you're using a complex query, fresh data will be requested every time a user preview the data mart or open the capacity view configured with the data mart. So different sessions will make a call to the database to extract the fresh data, and this can cause performance issues on the database. Finally, we have the summary data mart. This is the new data mart introduced on the 2002 version of TSCO. You can build a custom data mart to extract the data according to your requirement. This is based on a step-by-step, easy-to-use wizard that allows you to create data marts using the necessary metrics without requiring knowledge of SQL. This data mart, as the previous one, can be used in a custom view or a report. The Data Mart wizard guides you through the creation of the data mart, where you can select the type of content to be displayed, the primary entities, the required metrics you want to present, and you can also configure a time filter. Let's now jump into the creation of the three different types of data marts. For this demo, I'm using a 2002 environment that contains data collected from a vCenter and also from the TSCO servers. We will start with the data mart based on an analysis model. The first step to create this data mart is to have at least one analysis or model created on your workspace. In this case, I have one analysis that reports CPU and memory utilization and a model that evaluates the last 7 days of data. In order to create the data mart, navigate to Administration, Advanced Reporting, Data Mart. From here, click on Add and select the option Data Mart based on an analysis model execution. By default, the General tab is displayed. Here, the first step is to specify the data mart name. Then, the identifier is suggested based on the data mart name. It indicates the unique name of the data mart, and every identifier is prefixed with ER_V. You can edit the identifier name, and this must contain only letters, number, or underscores, and it cannot be empty. The identifier is the unique name of the table that will get stored on the TSCO database and can be used in SQL statements from other data marts. Next, you can define a brief description of the data mart. Then you need to select the analysis or scenario that contains the data that will be presented by the data mart output. In this case, I'm going to select my quick analysis. The materializer task is not a required field, but it allows you to materialize the data mart. You can select one of the out-of-the-box tasks or a custom one that you have created. Next, you can define the name of the table space where the generated table will be materialized. If this field is blank, TSCO default table space is used. The materialized validity can be set on hours, days, or weeks. This value makes reference to the validity of the data. For example, if I set it to 1 day, this means I will not see fresh data until the next day, even when I manually materialize it or gets called by the materializer task. By default, if I don't set any value, a 12-hour validity is applied. The entity filter is to confirm if you want to leave the filters defined on the analysis or the model. The last step is to define the column mapping. Here, you specify the name of every column of the data mart. You can use the same name from the analysis or one that provides a better description. In this case, the analysis reports the average value of CPU and memory utilization. Finally, you click on Save. To have a view on the data, you need to materialize the data mart by clicking on Materialize Now and Confirm. And finally, click on Preview. With this, we finalize the creation of the analysis model data mart. We will now continue with the creation of a data mart based on SQL. So let's navigate to Administration, Advanced Reporting, Data Mart. From here, click on Add, and now we select the option Data Mart based on SQL. On the first screen, you need to define the purpose. That is where you want to use the data mart. In this case, I'm going to use it for a capacity view. You also need to define the content of the data mart, that in this case I'm going to use case summary information. We'll click Next. On this screen is where you define the SQL statement of the data mart. For this demo, I already have a query that presents the top 10 system based on memory consumption for a specific domain. Let's click Next. On this screen, it will show the output columns identified from the SQL statement. Here is a requirement to have a system identifier meaning set to a column, and the values of this column needs to be unique. To set the meaning, you need to click on the column name and under meaning select System Identifier and apply. You can also define the meaning of all the columns if you desire. In the sorting options, you can sort the results of the data mart by clicking on the column name and selecting ascending or descending. Finally, the time period label is the period that will be displayed in the view. I will click Next. On this screen, by default, is selected to always see fresh data. As mentioned previously, this means it will load data every time you access the associated view in the TrueSight console for this data mart. If you are using a complex query, it may require more time to run and the database performance may get impacted. Create Materialize Table option will load materialized data when you access the associated view in the console. This is the best practice for complex SQL query since we'll quickly fetch the data from the database. The data mart is materialized and stored in a new table, which is the one called every time you preview or access the view. You need to specify the materialization system task and click Next. Finally, you need to set the name of the data mart, and like on the previous data mart, it will generate an identifier that can also be customized. You also have the option to add a brief description if desired. Finally, click on Finish. The data mart needs to be materialized and previewed to validate the output data. At the bottom, you can see on the summary table is extracting the data from TSCO database based on the SQL statement we define. With this, we finalize the creation of the SQL-based data mart. Finally, we will create a summary data mart. First, we need to connect to the TrueSight presentation server. We can quickly access using the shortcut link under the Home tab and click here. From here, we navigate to Capacity, Views, Custom Views, and we can click on any of our custom views created. We then click on the gear icon on the top right corner and add Summary Data Mart. This will open a new window presenting the Data Mart wizard. The first step is to select the type of content that will be displayed. It can be system or business driver. For this demo, I will select System and click Next. On this screen, we need to select the entity type. You can select to include all the entity types or just the desired ones. It also contains a search tool to facilitate the entity type selection. For this demo, I will select virtual machines and click Next. We now need to select the metrics that we want to be present on the data mart output. The metrics will be filtered based on the entity type previously selected, but you can also click on this checkbox to include all the list of metrics from all the entity types. Same as on the entities, you can select all the available options or the ones that you desire. I will select memory utilization and CPU utilization. Here, you can change the order of the metrics or remove them from the list. Let's click Next. On this screen, we need to define the time filter. You can select the last 1, 7, or 30 days filter. You can also define a time period. You can also select a global time filter that includes all the out-of-the-box and custom time filters created on the TSCO console. Or you can define a date range. For this demo, I will select the last 7 days and click Next. We now need to define a data mart name and optional a description. And we click Next. And this is the final screen, which shows a summary of the options previously selected. From here, you can define the system task to materialize the data mart that by default picks the out-of-the-box data mart materializer. You can also go back to the wizard if you need to make any modifications. Finally, click on Finish, and it will confirm that the data mart has been created. We can click again on the gear icon on the top right corner, but now select Manage Data Marts. This will take us directly to the Data Mart section of TSCO, where we can confirm that the data mart has been created successful and preview the data mart. As you can see on the summary table, it displays the data based on the options selected on the summary data mart. This concludes the demo of how to create the 3 different types of data marts supported on TSCO. Data marts can also be combined to generate centralized data. This is the feature called Data Mart Dependency that can use the table identifier name on a SQL-based data mart, and this way the output can be populated from 2 or more data marts. Using dependencies also provide other benefits. For example, the combined data mart will force the materialization of the inner user data mart if their validity period has expired. This makes sure the centralized output is using the most recent data. Dependencies will also prevent unintentional deletion of data mart. If the data mart is being used as a dependency, TSCO will prevent the deletion until you first delete the parent or reconfigure the SQL to not use that particular data mart. Dependency will show on the top right corner when you click on the data mart link. It will present as used by, when it's referenced, or depends on if it's using other data mart tables. Now we will talk about the different capacity views that can be integrated with data marts. Only 4 view templates support data marts. The Data Mart Explorer template is a chart table based view that can filter data by a specific system name and present detailed data that is extracted from the data mart. For example, you can use this template to generate a detailed view in the chart by the aggregation of the data in the data mart. The summary table is one of the most popular templates. Displays summary data in a table format. It provides a summary of elements based on the selected data and filters. For example, you can use it to provide an executive summary for the number of clusters, hosts, and virtual machines managed by a selected server. You can also configure render links to combine the output with other view templates like system details. The donut chart view is a summary type template that displays metrics and indicators in the form of donuts. It's a view that provides more visual context of the data mart. For example, you can display the ranking of capacity pools based on usage, risk, and efficiency scores. Finally, the visual map template. It allows you to create a more custom presentation by providing a set of tools to configure the view. It's a chart template view that uses symbols to provide the status of your systems. You can add standard symbols such as squares, circles, and triangles. You can add chart type symbols for data visualization such as pie or bar charts. You can even add an image of your server architecture or a text box, or you can associate a symbol with an entity based on a record in the data mart that then you can use the data to drill down into a new view and display its status. Let's now jump into the creation of a capacity view template that integrates with Data Marts. For this demo, we will use the Data Marts previously created, as well out-of-the-box Data Marts from TSCO. Due to the time, I will only run the process to create the Data Mart Explorer view, but this process is similar for all templates that integrate with Data Mart. In order to add a new view, we need to navigate to Administration, Capacity Views, and from here click on Add View. Here, we need to specify the name of the view and select the view group where it will be included, and click Next. From the list, we select the template desired. As you can see here, you will find all the templates that we previously reviewed. I will select the Data Mart Explorer and click Create. By default, it will take us to the Edit section of the view. To configure the Data Mart into the view, we need to click on the gear icon at the bottom table. On the Data Mart section, select from the list the one desired. In this case, I will select the SQL-based Data Mart that we previously created. Here you can define a title for the table, and finally, you need to specify the columns from the Data Mart that will be included on the table. You can remove columns, or you can add more columns by clicking on the Add link. You can also reorder the columns by editing the order number. Finally, click on Apply and Save. This completes how to create a capacity view template integrated with a Data Mart. To walk you through the rest of the view templates, I have already executed the process to create the views. You can have views on different tabs like a summary table, a donut chart, or a visual map. In order to edit the view configuration, you need to click on the gear icon on the top right corner and select Edit the Page. You can edit your template views to include more visual effects. On a column, you can edit the parameter to display the information on bars or alert signs. You can define a good and warning threshold on your different columns, and you can also edit your columns to use the link option to navigate to other views that can provide different information to your systems. This will level the information of your view for your final users. On the donut chart, you can tag servers as favorites in order to provide a faster access, and you can also configure the render link to other views for more details. Finally, the visual map, as mentioned previously, allows you to include a picture of your architecture and include monitors over the system names to display their current status based on the values of the Data Mart configure. This concludes the Capacity View demo. Now we will review the most common issues reported by our customers. The first one is why is the reason for a Data Mart materialization to end on Aura error snapshot to all or unable to extend the temp segment. A snapshot to all error occurs when there is a long-running query that accesses data that is being modified by other tasks. This falls to the value configured on the undo retention and undo table space, since this determines how much space is reserved to store past data. The first point to validate is to make sure that you are running the latest CHF. This is very important since this will resolve any internal and known issues with Data Mart. A second validation will be to execute your query directly on the TSCO database. If you present the same issue, this will confirm the problem is directly on the query performance and not in the product. A possible solution will be to modify your query to process the data by chunks of a set number. The second most common issue is presented when the capacity view fails to query the Data Mart configure. The most common cause is when there is an incorrect syntax on the SQL or an incorrect metadata associated with a column. In this case, the best plan of action is to open the data prb.log that can be found on the folder BCO Home Data Hub log and confirm what is the root cause of the problem. To present better this common issue, I will now navigate to my presentation server. Here, I have a capacity view with a Data Mart Explorer template configured. When I click on the view, I receive the error message mentioned previously. The error message contains the Data Mart ID that is failing, but no further details. I will now connect to the application server and navigate to the Data Hub log folder. From the Data Hub log folder, I will now open the data prb.log file and navigate to the end of the file. Here, we can have more detail on the error message. We see the Data Mart ID and clearly an inconsistent data type message. I will now navigate to the TSCO console and open the Data Mart reference on the error message. Here we navigate to the Data Mart section. We can filter the Data Marts by ID, and we edit the Data Mart. We advance to the meaning column section, and we can see here there are two timestamp meaning, one for an actual date and another one for an average value. Let's make the correction. In this case, the average value should have a meaning of value. We click on Apply, and we save the change. We need to materialize the table in order to take the new meaning on the column. We will now navigate to the presentation server and validate if it's now working properly. Let's refresh our view. And we can validate it is now working properly. This completes the troubleshooting section. I will now hand over to Bao Phac that will present the best practices for role-based access.
Thank you, Adrian, for the presentation on Data Mart and Capacity View best practices. My name is Bao Phac and I'm a Senior Technical Support Analyst at BMC Software. I will present the best practices on role-based access. Role-based access is an access policy based on user roles instead of user permissions. This is defined in different ways in each console, so the same user account may get different privileges. In the TrueSite Capacity Optimization Application Server, also known as the TSCO console, users are authenticated by the Remedy Single Sign-On server. Authorization is given by TSCO user roles containing a list of allowed features such as view analysis or edit analysis. In the TrueSite Presentation Server, also known as the TrueSite console, users are authenticated by the same Remedy Single Sign-On server. So once you are logged into one console, you also have access to the other console. Authorization is given by a combination of TSPS user roles and authorization profiles. The Remedy Single Sign-On product is an authentication system for a multi-software environment that enables users to present credentials for authentication only once. It is used by many BMC products to share authentication tokens. Integration with Kerberos, SAML 2.0, and LDAP is possible, but for this webinar, we will be using only the local user management system. If your users and groups are defined by a third-party system such as Active Directory, they will be treated the same way by the TrueSite Capacity Optimization and TrueSite Presentation Server products. Creating a user in RSSO is as simple as providing a login name, a user full name, and a password. For the user to function in TSCO and TSPS, the user must also belong to a RSSO group. A group in RSSO is also known as a role, although it is not the same as a TSCO user role nor a TSPS user role. For this webinar, I will use the term RSSO group. Creating a RSSO group is as simple as providing a group name and an optional description. Afterwards, you add local users to the group. The Remedy Single Sign-On for TrueSite package comes with predefined RSSO groups for TrueSite Capacity Optimization. The names for these all start with the word capacity with an uppercase C. The TrueSite Presentation Server hosts the web-based TrueSite console functions and offers data visualizations from various TrueSite products. The TrueSite console doesn't have local user accounts. It offers a view-only access to the RSSO users and groups and a link to access RSSO directly. The TrueSite console user roles are different from the RSSO groups. It allows access to features offered by all TrueSite products integrated with TSPS. For example, if you have TSCO and TrueSite Infrastructure Management integrated, the roles will allow functionality for both products. In addition to the user roles, the TrueSite console also have authorization profiles. Authorization profiles provide role-based access control by associating users who belong to one or more user roles with specific privileges on the TrueSite console. This is not used extensively by TSCO, but when a new TSPS user role is created, an associated authorization profile must also be created. The TrueSite Capacity Optimization product enables capacity planners to analyze, forecast, and optimize IT capacity and performance across all IT resources and environments. The TSCO console doesn't have local accounts. It offers two sets of user settings, user roles, and access groups. The TSCO user roles are different from the TSPS user roles and the RSSO groups. It allows access to activities in the TSCO console and in the TrueSite console based on a mapping of one or more RSSO groups. For example, the out-of-the-box RSSO group named capacity_view is mapped to the TSCO user role named operator in uppercase. This role allows access to the capacity views and investigate studies on the TrueSight console, and only access to the reports tab in the TSCO console. It may not use any other features nor browse the workspace domains. Creating a TSCO user role requires an external name, which is one or more RSSO group names. The specific activities are then selected for the user role. The TSCO access groups allows access to data on the TSCO console. This allows the TSCO administrator to partition the data for different user roles. Creating a TSCO access group also requires an external name. The list of visible entities are then selected using a tree view of the workspace domains. Here are the out-of-the-box capacity roles defined in the RSSO product and their default mapping to the TSCO user roles. These RSSO groups are also mapped to the out-of-the-box TSPS authorization profiles. For this demonstration, a user was created in RSSO named webinar_capacity_operator. This user is a member of the out-of-the-box capacity_view RSSO group. In the TSCO console, the capacity_view RSSO group is declared as an external name for the operator user role. An access group was defined for this RSSO group to allow access to all data. It is mapped to the RSSO group capacity_view. This access group allows access to all domains and all reports on the TSCO console. There was no configuration done on TSPS because the RSSO group capacity_view is already mapped correctly. The webinar capacity operator user created logs into the TSCO console. In the My Profile page, we see that this user has an active role as operator, which allows access to capacity views, investigate, and reports. This user belongs to an access group that can give access to all domains data. At the top, we see that only the reports functions are available to this user. This user is unable to use any of the administration menus or visit the workspace domains, even though the access group gives access to all data. The user role does not give access to the workspace domains functions. On the TrueSight presentation server, this user has access to no capacity views. In this window, I have administrative access to the TrueSight console, and I will edit the access rights to the vSphere view group in order to grant that user access to that capacity view group. I navigate to the administration capacity views page. I switch to the view group list, and I search for the vSphere view group. Using the menu, I can edit access rights to this view group. Here, I will grant access to the webinar access group to see this capacity views group. Let's log out and log back in as a webinar capacity operator user. When accessing the TrueSight console, I can see that now I can access the capacity view group vSphere as granted by the administrator. This concludes the demonstration of the use case, which is to grant an existing user access to a specific capacity views on the TrueSight console. When customers have issues with TSCO user access, it is often due to mistakes in the configuration of TSCO roles and access groups related to the external names. Here are the rules. The external name must exactly match the RSSO group name and is case sensitive. The separator is a semicolon. There must be no white space characters around the separator or at the end of the field. There is a 250 character limit, so create multiple roles or access groups if you need to specify more external names. BMC support has created several troubleshooting guides for TSCO. You can find them in the troubleshooting section at the top level of the documentation tree. These guides are based on commonly raised support issues and offers additional information on functions and features. This is the reference section where you can find all the links to the documentation used in today's presentation. In today's webinar, we covered the following topics. Data Marts are very useful to present specific data for a set of systems based on different filters like entity name, type, system ID, and you can also define a time series. It is definitely the tool to consider if you want to present advanced views or dashboards to upper managers. The best practices are: make sure to use the data mart that you find more suitable and easier to use. Make sure that the output data match your requirements and is not generating more data that are not required. If you use the SQL-based data mart, make sure to use the public views. Data marts based on internal tables of TSCO is not recommended, and the best practice is to query the public views instead. For data marts that contain complex queries, it is best to use a scheduled materializer task. This will avoid performance issues on the TSCO database. Finally, select the appropriate template view based on your needs. For role-based access, we gave the definition of role-based access in a TrueSight capacity optimization deployment. The user access features were given for each component: the Remedy single sign-on server, the TrueSight presentation server, also known as the TrueSight console, and the TrueSight capacity optimization server, also known as the TSCO console. A demonstration of a use case was presented where an existing user with the TSCO capacity operator user role was granted access to a set of capacity views on the TrueSight console.
Thank you. And now I'll take us through the self-help in contacting BMC. The YouTube channel where this webinar will be posted is available at this link. It contains past webinars as well as a rich set of how-to videos. The Connect with TrueSight webinar schedule that contains future webinars as well as our past webinars is available at this communities link. Also, the Hot Off the Press newsletter contains trending information. And to contact technical support via web, phone, email, as well as these social channels are available through these links. That will conclude our session today. Thank you for attending.